Welcome to Difficult Conversation Africa broadcast. I present to you the host, Yinka Olaito.
It is another episode of Difficult Conversation Africa podcast. And as usual, I'll let our viewer knows the background before I introduce my guest. Today we'll be looking at trust deficit, rebuilding citizen trust in Nigeria governance. And the intro is very simple, and why this is very important. Nigeria governance landscape is facing a deepening trust deficit, from electoral controversies to corruption scandals to inefficiency in public service delivery. Citizens' confidence in government institutions has been eroded over the time. Trust is the cornerstone of democratic governance. Without it, civic participation weakens, accountability falters, and social cohesion break down also. Rebuilding the trust requires more than rhetorics. It demands transparency, inclusive governance, effective communication, and tangible reform that addresses citizens' daily needs and reality. In this episode, we explore what drives the trust deficits. We also look at the impact of governance and its development and the pathway through which confidence in Nigerian institutions can be restored. To unpack this conversation with me today, I have with me Mr. Ajibola Hamzat, African editor, CCIJ, co-founder of Wikimedia, and a PhD student with over 2 decades of experience. Welcome to the show, Mr. Ajibola.
Thank you very, very much, Mr. Yinka Olaito.
We thank you. Want to really appreciate the work you do. Is really important to democracy at CCIJ, and some other thing that you are involved with. We're so proud of the work you do as a co-founder at WikiTimes too, and many other opportunities that you have allowed your skill to be influenced with, both in Nigeria and Africa. And I must commend your work and you for standing out as a thorough professional who believe in the changes that we all desire. Okay, we go to the question of the day. Our audience, remember that the topic is trust deficit, rebuilding citizen confidence in Nigeria governance. And my first question to you, Mr. Ajibola, is this. What factors do you think have most contributed to the erosion of public trust in Nigeria governance over the years?
Again, thank you very much, Mr. Yinka Olaito, and I do appreciate the work that you are also doing in making sure that this country becomes better over time. Works like yours is very important for the survival of our democracy. So, to address the question that you raised around public trust, public trust is an ingredient of democracy. There's no democracy or democratic society that can survive without people having trust in the system. And so when trust is eroded, it also means that the value of democracy is also going to come down. And in the Nigerian context, one of the most common factors that contribute to the erosions of public trust in this country is the corrupt behavior of the Nigerian leaders and the politicians. Over time, many citizens of Nigeria have identified the corruption as one of the biggest problems affecting our journey to becoming a true democratic society. And when we talk about the corruption, it comes from the head, from the leadership, from the presidency to the lawmaking body and to the judiciary and to every other strata of the public institution. So corruption, it's a major factor that have contributed to the people lacking trust in our own kinds of a democratic system. And you could also point to the questions of failing at the job of governance. Many of our leaders are recruited to do the job of leading the people to greatness, to development. More often than none, they fail at that job. And when you recruit somebody to do a job and you realize that the person either does not have the competence or does not have the character to deliver on the job, you're not likely to keep trusting that that person will represent your interests. And I think these are the two important factors that contribute to the erosions of public trust in this country.
I'm glad that you are able to lay the foundation. But as a professional, how has the trust deficit evolved across different administration? Um, you know, since the return of democracy in 1999, because trust is gained over time, is earned. But since 1999, the trust deficit has been there. So for you, how has the trust deficit evolved?
Yes, thanks for that question. You know that in 1999, we are just coming back from decades of military
Military rules.
rulership. Yeah, and
Okay.
many Nigerians were so excited that at the dawn of democracy, that things are going to be different. We are now going to have leaders that will listen to us. We are not going to have a public institution that will function properly, and we'll have a system that responds to the yearnings and the interests of the public. Those are the expectations in 1999 when we were returning to civil rule. And you see many politicians who came that time making those promises that the civil rule is going to be different. It's going to be more remarkably different from the previous administration. So
Military
you have
rulership. Okay.
exactly. So you have all those promises, and the presidents will make promise, the governors will make promise, and the local government chairman will make promise, the councillor will make promise. You know, you could see a litany of promises at different levels. But after the first 4 years, you realize that most of the promises are nowhere being realized.
Okay.
So then the second term comes, and instead of them to redeem the promise that they made earlier, you keep seeing the relapse of the promises that people have made.
Promises is
And
made.
so exactly. So when you now see that your leaders are not people, are not men and women of their words, they just full of sounds, but without any substance, then you begin to start distrusting them. I think that is one event that accounts for the trust deficit that you mentioned. The other thing that also caused the deficit is when the government now get into the heart of propaganda. Over that period, government is now trying to do all kinds of manipulation, trying to sell dummy to the people, so to speak, making people believe that tomorrow's will always be better than today. Whereas we don't seem to be seeing anything concrete that you are doing today that will make tomorrow better. It's like the story in the animal farm where you see the pigs making a promise of a greater future by the moment they take the government from the man, and that's Mr. Manor in the Mr. Jones in the animal farm. But what happens after the pigs take the affairs of the animal kingdom? The situation did not get better. In fact, the situation continues to get worse. And over a period of time, when people start losing trust, then they engage in propaganda. So it is the same thing that you see in Nigeria and many other funny democracies like ours, where government engages in all form of propaganda as a way of trying to manipulate people and making them to think that things will get better, even if there's no evidence of it getting better today. The other thing that I will also mention that is responsible for the evolutions of the distrust that we see today is the impunity in the system. I mean, law should rule in a democracy, but when people break the law, when people violate the law, when people fail in the promise they make, and they don't even care about it, there's nobody that holds anybody accountable. And even if you, as journalists, you report and expose some of these misconduct in the government, nothing happens to many of these guys. They will always find a way of protecting themselves. So
Mm,
leaders continue to
mm.
act with impunity. And with this level of impunity, you realize that people start losing trust in the government, and those are the traces of the evolutions of distrust that we see today.
The fundamentals you have raised are very vital, and I think that that will lead us to the next discussion. And one of the things that I picked out was the fact that expectation and promises. People have greater expectation of civilian rules, and they hope that things will change. And then the politicians came with big promises that were not fulfilled. Eventually, the level of distrust continue, and there are no changes. And I think that that will now lead us into the impact of those trust deficits. We all know that election today, there's always electoral apathy. People don't even want to vote. They don't even know whether their vote count. And therefore, my question is, in what way does a lack of trust in governance affect citizen participation, particularly in electoral turnout and political accountabilities?
I mean, you have just mentioned it in a very direct way. One of the outcome of that distrust in leadership and government is the low turnout during the election. I mean, you and I would witness what happened, especially in the just concluded election, the general election in 2023, where less than 30% of Nigerians actually voted, despite the fact that over 90 million Nigerians were registered to vote. But people
Were
didn't,
registered. Okay.
yeah, were registered to vote. People didn't come out to vote because everybody think that, I mean, at the end of the day, what happens? These people will do their thing. The politicians will always do their thing, which is to lie and to steal votes and to and to and to
Mm,
and to go to courts and go and make a mockery of democracy. And that's exactly what happened. Even those who decided to participate, they were even further disappointed. As we saw in Lagos, many people were beaten. There was a viral image
mm,
of a woman and I went to vote and
mm,
she was bloodied and she was beaten. That should not be happening on election day, but
mm,
that is what happened to many Nigerians in Lagos, in Rivers, in Kano, in many states. So when it is no longer sure for us to even participate in civic engagement like voting, so you see low turnouts during the election because people do not trust the system. And that is what we witnessed in 2023 and even the election before. You could also see the impact of
mm,
this distrust in the people's attitude in engaging their government after the election. Nigerians are no longer interested
mm.
in holding their leaders to account. They don't challenge the policies of the government as much as you expect it to happen in democracy. People just don't give a hoot about whether this government performs or
Mm.
doesn't perform. They just want to
Or
go on with
not.
their own private life. And that is one of the impacts of the distrust in the system. And you could see it even in the effort to get people to pay taxes. Nigerians are one of the citizens in the world who do not care about paying taxes to the
Paying
government.
taxes.
Yes. And there's a justification for that. Because when you have a government that is not responsible for the education of your children, and that does not really show much care for the health of its
Commitment to your.
citizens.
Mm,
Yes, the health of the citizens, the older people, when you retire, you don't have any assurance that when your health starts failing, you could walk into the hospital and get proper health care. You cannot, when your children or your spouse are sick, you cannot be sure that they will get good health care because many of the doctors have disappeared to foreign lands, and that
mm,
infrastructures like roads, like other means of traveling, are in total are broken. So when you don't have government uh, providing the basic needs of the citizens, so there is also no justification for people to wanting to pay taxes, and that
pay
is why
taxes.
it's yeah, that's why it's very very difficult for people to really be committed uh, in carrying out the duty of paying taxes. And I've mentioned that also there is no effort of holding political office holders accountable. People just do not care any longer. Even when the journalists, investigative journalists, report about the wrongdoings that happen in government, about the abuse of power of the politicians, people just don't give a damn because it seems that people are tired. They are no longer interested because their government does not listen. And so these are the impacts that you witness in a system like this. So you could describe Nigerian democracy as a broken democracy because a broken democracy is when people are totally apathetic to participating in public life.
And that's a heavy word, sir. That's very heavy. And I hope that let's begin to look at possible solution, particularly from the part of government. Things can change, and they do change if there's a political will. So, for you, how critical is the fight against corruption to rebuilding trust, and what practical step do you think government must take beyond mere anti-graft slogans that we currently have?
Yeah, thank you very much. Um, I think the practical steps that the governments of Nigeria, like any other countries that wants to be responsible, the steps that they must take is to ensure that the law must rule. The rule of law, it's a very strong pillar of democracy. And Nigeria is one of the countries with many useful law, but most of those laws they are useful on papers. They are not
They are
laws
not
that
implemented.
they are not implemented. So, what is the
Obey.
use of any law that is not executed? So, I think so for us to really change the situations in Nigeria, we must ensure that the law must rule. Nobody, nobody, regardless of their stations in life, must be above the law.
Above the
Unfortunately,
law.
Rivers, yes, unfortunately, Rivers is the case in Nigeria. It is in this country and that you have the gov you have the governors violating the laws. You have the president. You have the lawmakers violating the law, and nothing happens. Even after they have left office, how many head of states, Nigerian head of states, who have been accused of corruption or stealing public funds, have been asked to come and answer questions after they have left office since 1999? None.
None.
Obasanjo administration, many Obasanjo was indicted, was mentioned, was accused, his vice was accused. And when Obasanjo left, Yaradua of blessed memory, he is out of the game now because he's dead. But
It's dead.
Jonathan
Yeah.
and then Buhari also of blessed memory, he's gone now. But none of these guys were asked to come and account for, you know, violations, wrongdoings that happened during the administration. And that is because we do not think that people of those status need to be held to account, despite the fact that we have law that says that, hey, the fact that somebody um, was president does not mean that he's above the law. Once he's out of office, he can be held to account. But we don't do that because the law does not rule in this country. It is in this country that you have people who are supposed to even enforce the law that breaks the law. The cases of several cases against the police will come to mind. You have the police involved in robbery, armed robbery in this country. You have the cases of police involved in corruption in this country. You have the cases of the customs involved in smuggling in this country. So many people who are supposed to enforce the law, you see them violating the law, and nothing happens. In fact, it appears that the law in this country is only made for the lower
Or the
people of low for the for the people of lower status, the commoners, and the bourgeoisie, the ruling class, are not held and obligated to the law,
accountable.
and so accountable. So if we must do cause any change to happen very quickly, any government that comes into power must ensure that first, what we describe as a law, that law must rule. If law does not rule, then we can as well not pretend that we are having a democratic system.
Well, well, that explains some of the next question I would love to ask. Which institution, legislative, government, security, and what have you, suffer most. But I think you have, and that's why we don't need to have confidence in judiciary, confidence in all the military apparatus and all of them. And I think that um, each of these institutions need to rework their image, and the people involved need to work out this reputational damage so that the deficits can reduce. But because of that, we go to how can leaders leverage effective communication, feedback mechanism, and citizen engagement to rebuild this confidence that is almost out.
Yeah, communication is very important because one of the biggest problem of conflict or causes of conflict is the breakdown of communication or poor
Okay.
communication. So when
Yeah.
people do not communicate um, clearly, or when wrong communication is sent out, or when the intention behind the communication is also dodgy, then it's a recipe for conflict. And we have the examples of all that in this country. Our government doesn't communicate very well because oftentimes they want to not communicate, rather they want to manipulate. And that is why you see people not trusting even when government try to even tell the truth, because the
Take
government
the
has
right
a
step.
history. Yes, government has a history of lying, of
Propaganda
misinforming,
and all of that.
of propaganda, and it's very important that the government realize that and make sure that people are properly communicated. I think the best way to start um, is to actually be transparent in their ways. And by being transparent means that there are certain laws that actually government can use to engender transparency and accountability. One of those laws is the Freedom of Information Act. That's a very beautiful law that the Nigerian government has never put to use since it was enacted in 2011. The law says that every public information must be made public. I mean, it's as simple as that. On no account should you hide, or do I need to be asking to know about how much is the budget for the 2025 and how much did you spend on the education of my children, or how much did you spend on the health of the citizen? I don't need I didn't need to be asking that question. That information should be in the public domain. We should be able to have access to that kind of information. All the contracts, all the spending, all the procurements that you have made in the last 12 months, these are information that are supposed to be made public. So any governments that want to be responsible, I want to be transparent, I want to communicate very effectively, first of all, you make sure that that law is properly enforced. Make all the public information public. Another good law, again, that could help the government of this country to have a better trust, or have people trusting them much more, is the Procurement Act. The Procurement Act is the act that allows for transparency in the way government, buys or purchases things on behalf of the citizens, because the money government is spending is public funding, and therefore you need to account to people how that money is spent. You need to be transparent, and the Procurement Act has actually made that very, very clear. How people should bid for contracts, how the people who bid should be selected, how the money should be disbursed, and how they should be accounted for. All those things are spelled out in the Procurement Act. But Procurement Act is a good law on paper, like the FOI Act. They
Mm,
are both good laws on paper, and
mm,
nobody bothers to really enforce those laws to the letter. The other important law,
mm.
I think, is this law about public, I mean, personal property. I've forgotten now. This kind of, when you are going to government, you need to disclose your
Code
property.
of conduct and all of that.
Yeah, the code of conduct bureau is responsible for ensuring that as a public officer, you disclose what you have when you are going into public service. I have XYZ amount of money, and
And
people
after
should have
that,
access to that information. People should have access to that information so that we know that, okay, when you are going into government, you said you have
this is what you have.
100,000.
This.
This is what you have.
How
And then
come
when
that
you are
you
leaving,
after leaving government you
yeah,
now have 10
when you
million?
are living, when you are living, we should be able to also know what how much you have. So if you now say you go into the government with just 100,000 in your account, and then you are living with a 10 billion, we have to explain to us, what did you do in the space of 4 years that was so profitable? If you are not Elon Musk or,
That
or any
could
of these
generate
tech
that
guys
kind of money.
that could generate that kind of money. So you have to explain. But these are very, very good laws that actually could make the government to be more trusted. But again, they are very good laws on papers. They are just like good laws
Now,
that were never enforced.
now let's look at the youth, and I think that you might need to help us find a solution to this, or suggest. With Nigeria youthful population increasingly skeptical of governance, what strategy can re-engage them constructively in democratic process?
Yeah, thank you very much. The youth are only a segment of the Nigerian population. So the experience of every other Nigerian is not separate from the experience of the youth of this country. The
But they have the
youth,
population and they are the tomorrow.
yes, 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 they are the tomorrow. What I'm saying is that what they experience is what even the adults, older people experience. They 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 experience the lack of promise being kept by their leaders. They experience misinformation and disinformation being perpetrated by their leaders. They experience corruption in leadership, and therefore they experience inability of the government to cater for their needs. Their needs to be educated, their needs to be empowered, their needs to be employed, and their needs to be protected. So these youths go through life having all these kind of experiences. So if you really want the youth to start trusting the government as well, then the government needs to start fixing some of these problems. We need to start fixing the problem of properly educating our youth. I mean, look at the NUC. I mean, sorry, and ASU are just gone on strike again after different
Again,
again that happened.
collapse of
No,
discussion.
yeah,
Mm.
no youth who have any respect for government allows their educational journey to be truncated as repeatedly as it is done in Nigeria. So we need to fix the education system, and not just fixing, we need to make it much better so that youth can be engaged, and when they are engaged they can contribute meaningfully to the development of our country. And when they leave schools, We should create an environment for them to be able to access jobs. And those ones who wants to do their thing, who wants to do startup, we should be able to create a system that will allow them to access capital for their businesses. It's only when you put all those things in places that you can begin to see the youth that will also participate and contribute to the development of the nation. When the youths are denied of their youthfulness, of the opportunities that they could use in their young age, then they grow up to become disillusioned old men, just like some of us. I mean, we all started as used to, hoping that our country would do so much for us. But when you look back, you realize that you have not really benefited from this country as youth in other places. And therefore, you don't have any commitment, you don't have any loyalty, you don't have any spirit of patriotism to your country. In fact, an average youth that you speak to today wants to japa, wants to go to the US, the UK, Canada. Yes, because the environment is not just good for their development and for their empowerment. So,
because of our time, let's just watch this together. I'm sure we'll have a part 2 to this. Speak to the role of civil society, one, and then what are your immediate recommendations that you think that government should begin to put in place to make the governance system a worthy project that everybody will be interested in?
yes, the CSO has very important role. I was speaking to a friend a couple of whiles ago that we don't do civic protest as much as we should do. In a country where the rights of Nigerians are being violated regularly, people should be protesting regularly. Protest is part of engaging. I give example of South Africa.
Hungry.
Yes, I mean, but you can as well die at home by not doing anything. At least if you go out, you have options that things might change. I mean, you could either die or live. But when you stay at home being passive, then the only option is that you die. I give example. I give example of South Africans that every week you see people protesting over one thing or the other in South Africa. Maybe because they come from the history of apartheid and all that. Or it should be part of our culture that people should learn to protest against what is not going on in the society. And the CSO are meant to be leading this kind of peaceful protest. So if CSO must be active, it is not enough to be writing press releases and speaking to the government. They have to be engaging the government in more active way. Protest should be a way of life for CSO. That's my own. And they should work together with
Well,
other
we
stakeholders.
understand the role, we understand that government position in that with protests in Nigeria is not that favorable.
And it's because we are not persistent about it. When we are persistent, they will know that whether you check or you do it, tomorrow people are still going to be on the street. The next day people are still going to be on the street. It must be part of our democratic culture that when things don't go wrong and you engage the government, in discourse, and the government, then you protest. You protest, you go to the streets. It is part of culture in very vibrant democracy. And CSO needs to recognize that and lead the charge. The government has a very important role. The primary duty of government, as our constitution says, is to protect the people and make sure that their welfare is guaranteed. Any government that fails to protect its own people, where people can easily lose their life, either through attacks from terrorists or bandits or through hunger, then that government does not fit to exist. So the government's role, the primary role of the government is to make sure that no citizen must be allowed to die under their watch. That's why the American, for one single citizen, they will go and to the length of to any part of the world to go and rescue their citizens if that citizen is in distress.
That's true.
Government sees its role as being the protector of the citizen will take that decision at every point in time. And they must make sure that every youth, every citizen is properly educated. Compare the populations of Nigeria, which is over 200 million, to the populations of Israel, that is about 6 to 7 million. the quality of citizenship in that country cannot be the same because it is not about number. It's about the quality and the empowerment you expose people to. An Israeli citizen, could do a lot more than a Nigerian citizen as we speak today because of the investment that the state has put in their citizen. Nigeria must also invest more in their citizens and not in their own business. I mean, the personal business and their own family, because that seems to be the preoccupation of many of our leaders. They invest much more in their own personal business that is not even located in Nigeria but abroad. And they invest much more in their, they steal not only for themselves, but for their children and their children at the expense of the common Nigeria. That should not be.
Thank you, Mr. Ajibola, for the insight you shared. And this is really, on that note, we will have to come to the end of this, and we're looking forward to a part 2. Government needs to rebuild that trust. Since 1999, hope had been dashed, and all of the attendant result is the fact that there's now a trust deficit in governance. And Nigeria is a great nation with over about 200 million, merging towards 250 million and above. And I think that it is time for us to, and then citizen engagement and participation is also important. Like you said, citizens need to wake up to their reality. Yes, government is not investing in them, and I think that we should begin now with the new tax reform where you can't run away from tax. I think that when we start paying tax and we can't run away, I think that everybody will begin to open their eye into everything. Thank you, Mr. Ajibola, the African editor, CCIJ, and co-founder of Wiki Times. Thank you for your time. And to our listener, I want to say thank you for always being here. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel and our newsletter on the podcast website, which is www.difficultconversationafrica.org. Thank you for viewing, and see you in the next edition.
Thank you for listening to this episode. For inquiry, please send an email to info@difficultconversationafrica.org. Telephone 0809 591. Please follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Difficult Conversation Africa. See you soon.